Good evening, everyone, and we'll commence the event. By way of introduction, my name is Mary Godfrey. I'm the Vice Dean of the Faculty of Nursing and Midwifery here in the College of Surgeons of Ireland, and I'm delighted to welcome you to our event this evening. This is an event for our fellows, our members and our friends, and it is great to be back in the college for an event such as this. For those of you in the room, I would just like to ask you to ensure your phones are off, and just to point to the exits, the right and the left. I feel like an air hostess. And just to remember as well to be informed that this session is being recorded. And a particular welcome to all of you who are joining us online from different countries, and also our special welcome to our two speakers whom you will hear later. So without further ado, I'll invite you to listen to the welcome and introductions which will be given by our Dean, Dr. Mary Boyd. So Mary, I'll hand over to you.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Mary Boyd, and I am the Dean of the Faculty of Nursing and Midwifery at RCSI. I would like to welcome you all to the Boucher Hayes Lecture Theatre, RCSI St Stephen's Green, Dublin, for our first hybrid Fellows, Members and Friends event of the year. I am sorry that I cannot be with you in person, but I'm watching with great interest alongside those other attendees joining us remotely from at home and abroad. Thank you for joining us this evening for our third event of this year's Faculty of Nursing and Midwifery annual programme of Fellows, Members and Friends event on the topic of Stigma is Contagious. Our speaker this evening is Professor Calvin Morley, Chair of Diversity and Social Justice, Nursing Department at London South Bank University. Professor Morley has travelled to be here this evening from London, and I thank him for being here with you all in person. Professor Morley is a registered nurse who has followed a clinical and academic career while remaining close to clinical nursing, particularly in the area of critical care. His research focuses on the interplay of gender, culture, ethnicity and health. A key objective of Calvin's programme of work is to reduce the gap in health inequalities through developing and improving cultural competence and developing a centre of inclusivity. Professor Morley is an international collaborator who works with teams in Trinidad, Jamaica and Australia, and with our own faculty, where he recently collaborated on a study on social media. Professor Morley is also joined this evening by Ms. Liz Hughes, Head of Equality, Diversity and Inclusion at RCSI. Ms. Hughes leads on RCSI's Athena Swan work, co-chairs and supports a number of EDI fora and networks, and helps to champion a culture of respect and inclusion across the university. The topic on the agenda this evening is one that affects all of us in both our personal and professional lives at every level. As you may be aware, RCSI and the Faculty of Nursing and Midwifery are committed to a culture of respect for all who engage with us, from patients to students, staff and the public. To achieve that level of respect, the principles of equality, diversity and inclusion are embedded in our organisational strategy. RCSI was the first higher education institution in Ireland to publish a Race Equality Action Plan, outlining the steps the university would take to improve the representation, progression and success of students, trainees and staff from minoritised groups at RCSI. It is our intention that our faculty, as part of the wider RCSI community, contributes to fostering and supporting a culture of fairness, respect and belonging in all areas of our work and reach. While Professor Morley and Miss Hughes are the topic experts this evening, I would like to suggest that as we listen and learn, that we think of the material from a variety of perspectives. First and foremost, as people who engage with others throughout our lives, as nurses and midwives, as staff, managers, teachers, and administrators. Every interaction has the potential to be tainted with stigma, and yet, equally, each has the opportunity for improvement to increase equality and equity. Let us take what we learn here this evening, not just into our clinical practice, but into the full sphere of our daily lives. I'm very much looking forward to hearing from our speakers, so I won't delay and would like to welcome Professor Morley to get our session underway. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Boyd, indeed, for your welcome and introductions. And we'll proceed to, and I would like to welcome Professor Morley to the podium now to give your lecture. Thank you very much. Sorry, Mary.
So,
Good
do I
evening.
need to stand here?
Evening.
Yeah. Sorry, I just need to go to the next one. There we go.
So I must stay here, or can I move around?
So you can kind of move around from here to here, and then, but just because you have to use the mouse, whatever's comfortable.
Okay, great. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming. I know there's a full online room and there's a partially full in-house room, which is great. Hybrid is wonderful, isn't it? I was doing some work this morning. I was chairing our Chief Nursing Officer for England's Black and Ethnic Minority Group Black History Month celebrations. And because there are rail strikes in London, or England rather, we had to cancel the face-to-face and have a little bit hybrid because people couldn't get into London. But thank you all very much. And thank, did I go right? I'm not sure which one.
Oh, sorry.
Could we not use, yeah, retain?
Oh yeah, there we go.
Use retain. Great. Okay, great. So my talk is to really and truly look at stigma, and I should say I became familiar with the Royal College here of Surgeons in Ireland because of Professor Thomas Curtis. And Thomas and I met online via social media, and I give bad dad jokes on a Friday night, and Thomas talks about running. So there we go. And we talked a lot about some of the stuff that I do and the work that I do when I say stuff. And we had this, we were talking about something which I'll come on to a little later on, is how we're all on this journey towards understanding race and racism. And one of the things is that people are sometimes scared of saying that they acknowledge racism happens between groups, or between ethnic minority groups, I should say, and because of their racial differences. So today I want to cover a little bit about that sensitive topic and how we go about that and acknowledge it and work with it towards equity and equality. But first of all, when we talk about stigmatization, you know, I didn't want to go through all of Goffman's theory and what Goffman said about stigma and all that. Most of us probably know some of that. But it was nicely summed up by the Royal College of Psychiatrists in Scotland. And they said to stigmatize is essentially to mark someone as different and treat them accordingly. Okay, so we see someone and we think they're different and therefore we treat them. But there are different types of stigma. So it can be viewed as public stigma, where society itself, there's that level of societal discrimination and behavior. So you would begin to think of how society at this public level discriminates. And then there is self-stigma, where we look at others' beliefs and we actually begin to internalize that. So with self-stigma, we begin to internalize what other people say about you. And then there's structural stigma, which is where we look at policies, the laws, and the environment. And it's quite similar to if you look at racism in that sense, okay? If we align that to racial discrimination, it's almost the same thing. There's a public view, there's that self-belief of what you believe or who you believe you are, you internalize it. And then there's the structural view of, and we hear a lot in organizations where we work these days about structural racism. So just moving on. Just to talk a little bit about personal stigma. Personal stigma arises because of our diversity and who we are. Okay, we're all very diverse people. And with that diversity comes themes. So our diversity really and truly is based on part of what we call our intersectionality. And these are terms, if you work in this area of equality, equity, diversity, inclusion, we begin to see those terms of intersectionality. So our diversity arises out of our intersectionalities, and that gives us themes. So the themes, for example, like black male, black gay male, white female, white middle class male. We begin to have these themes arriving. But out of those themes come meaning. It gives us our identity and it tells us who we are. And so we begin to see ourselves. Some of it is framed by that public stigma and that perception of the public and what we believe by ourselves as well. So that's all intricately woven when we begin to do that. But out of that meaning comes struggle and success, or success and struggle, because we begin to struggle with some of those ideas. Well, why do you look at me like this? Why do you think of me like that? And then you begin to think, how could I make it better? And that's why in organizations like yours and mine and all other organizations, really a lot of other organizations, we have EDI leads, we have strategies, we have race action plans, we have ways of advancing women in their careers, because we look at making success out of those meanings. You know, I recently attended an Athena Swan meeting, and it was a conference held in Oxford, in England, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit because it really broke my heart. The room was full of white women only. And so on the second day of the conference, I had to put my hand up and I said, can I ask a question? Can all the white women in the room put their hands up? And all the white women put their hands up. And I said, can all those white women who know a woman of color keep their hand up? And some of them put their hands down. And I said, those white women who knew women of color or who know them, how many of you invited one of those women of color to come to this meeting here today? Because Athena Swan is about advancing the careers of women. But if we come back to diversity and the intersectionality, that intersectionality was missing. It probably didn't go down well that I told them they were using Athena Swan to advance the careers of white women rather than look at it on the whole, because nobody thought there was a place for women of color there. But sometimes we have to speak those truths and let people know what's happening. So it's really important when we look at success and struggles. And I know we have a small audience in the room and much people online, and I'm not sure if online people are engaging in a chat, but I wanted to talk, I wanted to have a little minute self-reflection on how people can think how their diversity has been embraced by the group or the society they live in, or how it has been shunned, or could have been shunned, or could have been embraced. So anyone in the audience, I'll take probably two people's answers. Can you think in your own self-reflection how your diversity, your intersectionality might have been embraced or might have been shunned or could be? Any comments? I'm putting people on the spot, I know.
I think very often as a gay man, very often when I see what are construed in organizations like universities as family-friendly policies, they usually mean a certain type of family, which means a woman having a child. And it's about maternity leave, maybe a bit of paternity leave, but it doesn't kind of reflect that families come in diverse ways. And I don't have children. I don't have an elderly parent to care for, but I might have wider caring responsibilities because of the community and the type of families we form.
So that's really important. Thank you. Anybody? I'll take one more if anyone wants to share. Anyone in the room can think how your own diversity, how that might have been shunned or embraced, or how it could be embraced. So from that, we learn we have to look at those policies really and see how we make it more inclusive. Okay, I'm going to go on because I know time is not my friend. And one of the things is, out of all of these things about stigma comes prejudice. We begin to prejudice people when we start to think of them in certain ways. I don't want to be with this person. I don't want to sit next to them, okay? And we see it even as academics in classrooms, how groups start to form and how people sit certain places and how they wouldn't let certain people sit in certain spaces, okay? So it's really important. Out of all of that, there comes prejudice when we start to look at stigma. But again, what happens is we find justice. So we begin to look at how justice emerges out of the prejudice, because there will be people in the room or wherever you are in your organization who would say, actually, we need to look at what is right, what is the justice here. We need to look at equality, and I have put in equity in there, because I think we need to move towards equity. It's how, so equality is saying, as you all know, I'm probably preaching to the converted, but equality is where we say, everyone, there's a lovely cartoon drawing that I have used, with the apple tree. Everyone is entitled to pick an apple. I can't reach the apple. Okay, I give everyone a ladder, but someone's shorter than the other. But I've given you both the ladders the same size. So the shorter person still can't reach the apple. That's equality. Equity is when I adjust the ladder, yeah? To make sure that you can reach an apple as well. So it's how we adapt those policies. And as we begin to go into this new phase of decolonizing curriculums, that's something we need to look at. How do we make our nursing curriculum also more equitable? What are we doing? Oh yeah, all students can do this, but actually, is it equitable? Are we giving certain students the tools to succeed, and staff where they're concerned? So that was just me trying to introduce stigma and get us to think about stigma and what it can lead to. But I really wanted to focus a bit on stigma and racism. So Carl Linnaeus, in about 1735, Carl Linnaeus was a scientist. He was particularly concerned with nature and how we order species and how we identified species. And in 1735, he produced the Systema Naturae, the systems of nature. And what Linnaeus did was he identified 4 varieties of man. And that was the beginning of what we call scientific racism, because he said there are differences in men. There are 4 types: Europus albus, which is European white; Americus rubescens, American reddish, because they were red in color; Asiaticus focus, Asian tawny because of their structure, their bone structure and density; Africus niger, African black. What they did at the time is they corresponded to the different continents in the world at that time, because the world wasn't fully discovered. But so Linnaeus was one of the beginning fathers to actually start to introduce and stigmatize groups, first of all, by how he labeled them. He didn't only just label them, he went on further to talk about them, but he had followers, like we all have followers. We all have people who follow our doctrine and what we say, and they believe in us, and we follow other people as well. He had his followers. David Hume, philosopher, and Immanuel Kant, they drew on the inspiration of the work of Linnaeus. And this is what Hume said. Hume said, "I am apt to suspect the Negroes in general and the species of men, for there are 4 or 5 different kinds, to be naturally inferior to the whites. There was never a civilized nation of any complexion than white." And that's from his book, Hume of National Characters, 1754. What is really interesting about Hume and Kant, and I've taken a different view when we start talking about decolonizing the curriculum. I appreciate the value of their work. When I was a doctoral student and I had to learn philosophy, these are the philosophers I was told to turn to. Now I find other philosophers that I can direct my students to. But one of the most important things about Hume and Kant, when they wrote their stuff, and they both wrote together, was that they had never ever set eyes and engaged with a person of color. They just wrote it based on Linnaeus's work. They had never been to the colonies. They had never understood the slave trade. They just read about how someone stigmatized. So this is how I said, scientific racism started. And this is what they said. So they said for white Europeans as such, they graded them as well, stigmatized them by talents and temperament. So they were lively and ruled by customs. They were fair in complexion. They were sanguine, brawny, gentle manners, governed by laws, acute judgment, and quick of interventions. And those are the characteristics. And if you're from Native America, you're meant to be tenacious, contented, and governed by habit. And Asians were stern, greedy, and led by opinion. There's people They sort of lose certain things as we go down the ladder. And Africans were cunning, slow people, careless and ruled by caprice. They were of black complexion, phlegmatic temperament, relaxed fiber, crafty, indolent, and careless. And that was the start of how we started to stigmatize people of color. It actually started by philosophers. You and I have probably always held in high regard and still do, and think, this is how, they've influenced my doctorate when I did it. Because I didn't know about this until I really fulfilled it myself in reading. So it's really important to understand how stigma influences racism and where it started from. And that's why I was talking earlier on. My background is in nursing and healthcare, and we have a lot of international recruited nurses. And we have different groups of nurses being treated differently. So if you're a Filipino nurse, you're seen as greedy because they do a lot of extra shifts. But they do that because they have to supply money back home. It's not that they're greedy. If you sit and understand the context of why they're doing that, yeah? But they're also gentle in some respects and subservient. And that's how people begin to stigmatize them. And then, we have different nurses from different racial backgrounds that people hold different ideas about. And sometimes, as I say, most of us or most white people are on a journey towards understanding race and racism. And it's really difficult to have that conversation to say, actually, but we see this happening even among those groups. But that's because it's been indoctrinated in us. So we need to look at how we move away from that stigma. So moving towards racial harmony, this year the theme for Black History Month is, actions, not words as such. We've been hearing a lot of words since the COVID-19 pandemic, since the Black Lives Matter movement, the killing of George Floyd, and there have been a few other murders since then of Black people. So we want to move away from the action, and I'd rather move into the action and away from the words. And I'm very conscious of how long my talk is, so I'm going to wrap up with saying there are 3 steps that I would like to say to you. How do we do this? How do we begin to look at appreciating and embracing racial diversity? Well, let's start by appreciating difference. We're all different. Rather than label species by what we can and can't do, let's just appreciate the difference people have in each other. Okay? When I go back home to the Caribbean, they really walk slowly. I'm the only one walking fast because I have somewhere to go. And I have to stop and think, yeah, but this is like, they still get the job done. I called for my sister one day at work, and the guy said, boy, Lena, she don't come in until about 10 o'clock, she should start at 9, okay? But they get their job done. So we have to learn to appreciate how different cultures and contexts works. When people are here in the United Kingdom, yes, or Europe, we expect a different work ethic, but we need to appreciate the difference and where people come from and why they may do certain things, rather than label them, okay? So if human Kant was able to understand the context of why those groups were operating in that way, he wouldn't have labeled them like that. Secondly, is to value diversity. We're all different, and with diversity comes intersectionality. They go together. We're not just one person. We're complex beings, and we're made up of different facets. Mother, daughter, sister, student, staff, and there are all these things we need to look at. But there are those core characteristics. When we talk about the protected characteristics, we need to look at how we value those, and what do we do to value them. So how do we celebrate diversity? How do we I worked in a faculty once where once a year our deans would say it's a cook-off. Everybody bring a meal from where they originate from, because we had so many different people. So you could find ways of valuing diversity. And then the more the policy ways, which is where we work in organizations, how we move those agenda forward. And really and truly, we want to look at how, with racial harmony, how we see new possibilities. How can we begin? When we talk about, if we look at colonization, colonialism gave us one way of thinking. Colonialism was based on economic value, and it taught us this is the only way things should be done. Now, when we look at decolonization, it tells us there are different ways. So there's not one way of learning, there are different ways of learning when we look at decolonizing the curriculum. So if we could see possibilities of decolonizing the way we behave, we would have not one view, but we'll have several views of how we value people, how we appreciate them, and how we begin to work together to, as I say, not have words, but actually have actions. So that was the end of my talk, because I'm very conscious Liz had to come and do her bit. Thank you all very much. I'm sure we'll take some questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor Morley. That was really illuminating and creates an awareness and heightens our awareness as well. And can I just read out some of the comments that came in the chat? I think they're really, really interesting. And one particularly was, fantastic presentation, really enforced the importance of the principle of nothing about me without me. And some others as well, and certainly they resonate. There can be stigma around vocal accents in Ireland. Stigma isn't always about colour. Too many assumptions can be made about me, how you dress, how you speak, the hair. And another comment, even if embraced, many times diversity is a moment in time. And policies don't always take into account those who do not have children, as was raised by one of our attendees here. And further, those who are childless by circumstances, the assumption is made that you made the decision. So I think there are noteworthy comments that have come into the chat as well. It gives me great pleasure now to welcome Ms. Liz Hughes to come to the podium and give her lecture in relation to diversity and inclusion and equality, the RCSI experience.
No, well, that's a pretty hard act to follow. So good evening, everybody. My name is Liz Hughes. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm reasonably new to RCSI. I'm with them nearly a year, which has flown by, but I still see myself as a newbie, and I'm really honoured to share the platform with Professor Morley. And many thanks to all in the Faculty of Nursing and Midwifery for the invitation, and it's lovely to meet the Vice Dean, Mary Godfrey. So thank you very much for the welcome, and thanks very much to Catherine and Anya as well. So for the record, I am an EDI generalist, so it is as much a privilege for me to be here to hear from Professor Morley as it is for all our guests. And as you correctly note, Professor Morley, we are all on a journey and we are all learning in this space. So as many of you are aware, Ireland as a nation is quite young from a multicultural perspective, and we've a different history and past compared to our colleagues in the UK. So we've lots to learn from experts like yourself, and indeed our diverse and engaged students and staff who really drive so much of our work in this space. So this evening I'm going to try and provide some background and context into the world of EDI in Ireland, and more specifically in RCSI. And I'd also like to share some examples of innovation and collaboration in RCSI that supports our work. So for starters, I thought it would be helpful for some of our friends and fellows to have a look at this infographic, which has been kindly provided by our communications department. And I think it really encapsulates the reach and indeed the influence that RCSI extends when we consider our vision to be an international leader in supporting healthcare professionals through high quality education, research and service to enable people to live long and healthy lives. Areas, as you can see in the slide, like student engagement, international collaboration and good health and well-being all form an important part of RCSI's culture. And our work within the EDI unit plays an important role to ensure that we can all work and learn in an environment defined by dignity and respect. In implementing EDI and RCSI, we are guided by the 9 equality grounds, and I know I've said 10 there, but give me a moment. So in the Irish Constitution, there are 9 protected grounds, and these equality grounds are particular social categories for people for which people might be at higher risk of experiencing discrimination. So as you can see, the 9 protected grounds are age, race, family status, disability, sexual orientation, membership of the traveller community, religion, gender and race and ethnicity. And RCSI has also adapted a 10th protected ground, which is the socio-economic ground. And we expect this will be added to the Irish Constitution as there's a review of equality legislation taking place at the moment. In the EDI unit, our core aim is to ensure that RCSI is a place where our students and staff are respected and treated fairly regardless of these 10 grounds. And we also maintain intersectionality at the heart of our work. As Professor Morley said, intersectionality can be described as the way in which the effects of multiple forms of discrimination, like racism, sexism and classism, combine, overlap or intersect, particularly for minority groups. As I mentioned, equality is specifically enshrined in the Irish Constitution, and our equality laws protect individuals from certain types of harassment, discrimination and sexual harassment. Some examples of equality legislation in Ireland include the Equal Status Acts 2000 to 2018, which promotes and mandates equal treatment for accessing goods, services, facilities and accommodation. And then another example is the Employment Equality Acts 1998 to 2015, which promotes and mandates equal work opportunities. So, as you know, the theme for this evening's talk is Stigma is Contagious, and that really goes to the heart of EDI's work. And when you think about it, there is stigma of varying degrees associated with each of the equality grounds, and Professor Morley has done a brilliant job at going into stigma in more detail and giving us a greater idea of how it's evolved and how it continues to be a significant challenge in our society. And a lot of work that RCSI does is about challenging these negative behaviours, supporting our minority communities with policies and changing and challenging perceptions and bias. And we do that through training, awareness raising and education campaigns. And I just give 2 examples here of examples of stigma. So, and it's funny, Mary mentioned this particular example when we were chatting earlier. But people of Asian ethnicity reported experiencing racial slurs, violence and extreme physical distancing as media and government officials increasingly stigmatise and blame Asians for the spread of COVID-19. So that was a big issue, particularly at the start of the pandemic. And in Ireland, one of our protected groups is the traveller community, and the traveller community faces harassment and stigma on a number of different levels. But I suppose it's well known and reported that suicide is a challenge among the traveller community, and it's an even bigger challenge because there's a stigma associated with seeking help for people with mental health issues. So that's an example of intersectionality that I thought I might share with the group. So for our fellows, members and friends who are joining us this evening, I thought I might give a little bit of context to how equality, diversity and inclusion has become a key pillar in the higher education landscape and of course here in RCSI. So in many ways, Athena Swan in Ireland gave a framework and indeed government support to mainstreaming EDI in higher education institutes, and this resulted in the EDI unit being established in RCSI in 2017. The following year, the unit published its strategy, and you can see a little thumbnail of it there. And hopefully you can see another picture which reflects our strategy. And we endeavour to embed equality, diversity and inclusion in all that we do. As Dr. Boyd noted earlier, EDI is an important part of our wider institutional strategy and sits alongside reputation and quality as a foundation for continued success in building positive culture for staff and students alike. We are and continue to be committed to achieving EDI in everything we do. And I'll just give you an example of a couple of the things that we're doing within the unit. But I won't keep you here all night, so I'll just mention 2. But it's about promoting a culture of individual ownership and shared community values of dignity, respect and fairness for all, so as to eliminate discrimination and harassment. And we also want to ensure that we recruit and retain a diverse body of students and employees at RCSI by building a sustainable community of practice around EDI and creating a learning and working experience that allows each individual an opportunity to thrive. So what is Athena Swan? Well, the first thing I want to say is just your point on that meeting that you went to. I'm delighted to say that RCSI's Athena Swan Project Officer is a very proud woman of colour, and she is in the middle of our institutional renewal at the moment. So, and her name is Lucy Porter, and she is a brilliant colleague and professional. But to give people a little bit of an idea of what Athena Swan is, well, it's a framework that's used across the globe to support and transform gender equality within higher education and research. And the reason why we commit to Athena Swan and RCSI is that much and all as we'd like to think positive change is possible, it's not always inevitable. So this is an internationally recognised quality mark that empowers us to develop and implement initiatives to support gender equality. And it was gender equality initially. So when the Athena Swan Charter was launched in early 2015, it was used to address gender equality, but now it's been expanded to look at more intersectional issues. And engagement with the Charter is a key pillar of Ireland's national strategy for gender equality, and the progress in achieving that is linked to institutional eligibility for funding from Ireland's major research agencies. So as you can see from the slide here, RCSI achieved bronze Athena Swan status in 2018, and we have 4 departmental awards. And given that I'm among nursing and midwifery colleagues, it would be remiss of me not to congratulate the School of Nursing and Midwifery and the School of Physiotherapy, who are most recent recipient of the Athena Swan Bronze Award. I wanted to talk to you about our race equality forum, and as the Vice Dean noted and the Dean noted, this has been one of the big achievements that RCSI has implemented over the last number of years. So the Race Equality Forum was established at the beginning of 2021, and Professor Morley has alluded to the reasons as to why that was so important for an international university like RCSI to lead in that space. But our Race Equality Forum has a really diverse representation. We have about 40% student representation, approximately 50 members. And when we set up the forum, we wanted to promote open discourse, training and engagement. And one of the first tasks was to develop a race equality action plan. So the action plan, which was the first launched by a higher education institute, was launched in November of last year. And in fact, the Higher Education Authority have just launched their plan over the last couple of weeks. But our action plan was launched by Professor Cathal Kelly, our Vice Chancellor and Registrar, and our then President, Professor Ronan O'Connell. So I think that really demonstrates support at the highest level across the institute. And the action plan incorporates strategies and actions aimed at addressing race equality and discrimination, including microaggressions and unconscious bias across the university community. So one of the key outputs of the forum was to develop a race equality statement, which you can see here. So I might just read that out. In the pursuit of our mission to educate, nurture and discover for the benefit of human health, RCSI is committed to equal treatment of all, regardless of race or ethnicity. We acknowledge that racism, systemic inequality and discrimination exists in our society. I won't read the rest of the statement, but it is available on the slides, and I would encourage you all to read it. One of the, as I mentioned, the Race Equality Forum developed an action plan, and one of the key outputs was seven work streams, which included policy and practice, training and awareness raising, and education and research. And given the audience here tonight, I thought it would be useful to share some of the work of the education and research work stream, which has been really, really inspiring. So as Professor Morley noted, it is all about action, and I think these 3 examples really demonstrate the brilliant leadership that our staff and students have demonstrated over the last couple of years in trying to address racism. So much of the work of the education and research workstream stems from a greater focus on ensuring what is taught to the next generation of medical practitioners is constantly reviewed and interrogated. So our goal is to teach our students based on the best available evidence, progressing towards precision medicine, not race-based medicine. But most of all, we have to teach our graduates to be patient-centred, critical thinkers who are going to question race-based medical practices. In RCSI, Professor Marion Brennan, Deputy Director of our Graduate Entry Medicine programme, has been leading the Race Equalities Education workstream. And I'd like to take this opportunity just to present some of the initiatives that have been developed by Professor Brennan, again in collaboration with her colleagues and students. And I think that the word collaborate when it comes to our race equality work is just really, really important to emphasise. So in 2020, both Professor Brennan and the Director of GEM were approached by a number of students with the idea of running a summer anti-racism reading programme for students that would be followed by student-led facilitated discussions in term time. So this programme was modelled on a programme run at the University of Washington, and students were requested to read 3 chapters from Dorothy Roberts' Fatal Invention. These chapters focused on race as a social construct, which Professor Morley has touched on, the history of racism, again, which we've talked about briefly, and discusses the use of race in medicine. The workshops were co-led by students and 1 staff member in each group. And overall, students felt more informed about the history of racism and racism in medicine. And as a result, they felt more comfortable talking about racism and felt capable of calling out racist behaviour. And again, that points to the action that we need to see. The other example is that I wanted to talk about, or the second example, is diversity in clinical cases. And over the years, it has been noted by our students that clinical cases taught in Year 1 were sometimes lacking in diversity. The clinical cases were presented by an actor, and in RCSI we use surface models for students to practice clinical examination skills. Professor Shreenan and Professor Brennan partnered with GEM students, Amir Bakari, Austin Kapkara, and GEM clinical tutor Dr. Sayama Galapali to review weekly clinical cases. The team incorporated diversity into weekly case of the week, editing the case as well as recruiting diverse actors and surface models. This initiative had a positive impact on students' awareness, comfort and competence in interacting with diverse patients. And finally, the Represent project, which was led by Catherine Haley and Avril Hutch, Dr. Avril Hutch, who is former head of EDI in RCSI. And Represent stands for Revising Medical Education for Progress Against Racism Through Education, Skill Sets and Empowerment. And that particular initiative focused on increasing representation of images of people of colour in our teaching slides to ensure our students are prepared to make accurate diagnoses in all patients. The project involved reviewing lectures to identify gaps where images of patients of colour could be included. And further to this, Catherine engaged with other groups to identify sources that could be used to provide copy-free images of pathology. So I hope you agree that each of these projects are inspiring and will have a lasting impact on achieving race equality in medicine. And they also play a really important role. They also demonstrate what a really important role our students play in encouraging us all to think creatively and collaboratively. So I'm nearly finished. So my final few slides, it's about women on walls. So for the RCSI staff who are here, they're probably well used to this particular plug, but Women on Walls began as an Accenture initiative which was aimed to address the historical omission of women's portraiture in academia through a series of commissioned portraits of women leaders in sciences and humanities. And in 2018, Accenture partnered with RCSI to recognise the accomplishments of 8 pioneering women in healthcare for the historic building in St. Stephen's Green, so number 1, 2, 3. And then in 2020, during the pandemic, Accenture partnered with DCU, and I know that there's a number of DCU students attending this evening, so hello to all of them. But they commissioned 5 portraits of Irish and international women leaders in STEM. So Women on Walls enables people of all ages, all genders, and across multiple and diverse sectors to engage with portraiture to explore and challenge gender bias. And it very much reinforces the important concept of representation. After all, if you can see it, you can be it. So I'm just going to finish with a video, and hopefully this is going to work. And again, I can't take any credit for this. This is something that happened before my time in RCSI, but it's something we're really, really proud of. And I think my colleagues, both past and present, can take a well-deserved bow for creating such an inspiring and lasting legacy for RCSI and celebrating the role women have played in shaping healthcare in Ireland and indeed beyond. So thank you very much for listening. I'm sorry for going on so long, and I hope you enjoy this. YouTube will go on.
Thank you very much indeed, Liz. It's great to learn what RCSI are doing and putting it the action plan that's been actualised. And certainly I was very interested in your question, in your mention of education, because that correlates with what Professor Morley said in relation to education, nursing and midwifery education, looking at diversity, etc., and the whole context of stigma, etc., and diversity within nursing curricula. And that's something I think that educationists have to address. Can I invite you both to the table here for our question and answer session? And while you're coming up, I'd like to just share with those of you in the room some of the comments that have come in, some questions, but also some comments. One comment that came in was from one of our attendees virtually is, I chat to everyone, it opens my life up lots and interesting. I was chatted to lots by the football mums until my brother, who's overweight and with missing front teeth, came along with me one day. After that, even eye contact was avoided. Another one, thank you, Professor. Loads to learn for us aiming for equity. Also from Dr. Colleen Mycutt, she, her on Treaty 6 territory. She says, utilising cultural safety and humility as a lens to begin to tell our story as a nurse. As a Canadian scholar, I include Mary Seacole, Ashoka, Rufaida bin Saad al-Asalama, an Arab ethicist, Sojourner Truth, an American slave and abolitionist and champion of nursing education, Edith Anderson Montour, first Indigenous nurse in Canada, Bernice Redmond, first Black nurse in Canada. As educators, we must, and she emphasises, have historical figures outside of Florence. So every student has a role model which begins the process of decolonising and recognising the beauty of diverse gifts to advance our profession. This is the second time I've heard you speak, and I always learn more to grow and stretch. Thank you. Our first question from Dr. Boyd. Ms. Hughes, can you share how do the RCSI action plan to implement the socioeconomic inclusion?
So that is very much led by our engagement committee, which is led by Maria Kelly, head of engagement. So we will work very, very closely with Maria on the work that she does in engaging, I suppose, our community here in Dublin too. But at Grand Rounds today, she was talking about some of the initiatives that we're doing on a more regional basis. So that's everything from engaging with students, with school second level students, right through to our communities in Dublin too. So there's an entire strategy around that. But Maria would also work with our DARE and HERE students as well, and in terms of disability and socioeconomic deprivation, there's often an example of intersectionality there. So a student with disability is often socially and economically deprived as well. So what Maria tries to do is ensure, and the broader student team, is to ensure that we support our students in that terms.
Thank you very much for that. I'll take another one on comment online, and then I'll open it to the room. Liz, thank you for your informative talk. How can we change the mindset of individuals who view anything from the norm as different? Maybe Professor Morley, you can comment on that too. I'll open it to both of you.
I think it's, like I spoke about, like, this is a brilliant opportunity. It's about having a conversation. It's about challenging really bad behaviour. We talk about bystander intervention. We don't have to kind of plough into a situation that we feel uncomfortable about. It could be a text message where you just kind of go, that's not appropriate behaviour, but it is about education and awareness raising and all of those conversations. And it is about kind of looking at like the point that you did make about that Athena Swan group. Like I reflect myself, and I don't have that many friends who are people of colour. I have lots of not lots, I have a couple of friends in the LGBTI plus community, and I don't have any friends from the traveller community. And I think it's up to us all to try and reflect on that. And why don't we, and can we broaden our horizons and just do things that are different, and with a view to meeting different people, because it is that diversity of cultures and of people that will make us a kind of a whole person. But you are the experts, so I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you. I think it's really important to understand human beings. We've been indoctrinated, primary socialization. And I'll share something really briefly with you all. I did a project with the Bishop of London, and we looked at interfaith groups and health inequalities. Just within London, we looked at health inequalities. And we looked at we used five interfaith communities. So we used Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs, the Black Majority Church, the Anglican Church, I think that was it, and the Jewish community was 6. And one of the things is we had town halls, and we hosted one in a mosque. And I was brought up as a child in Christianity, really fundamental evangelical Christianity. It said you should not go into any other religious institutions other than your own. So this is when the person online is saying, you know, people who are rooted in that, it is very difficult. Even for me, I had to think like, oh my God, you know, I'm going into this mosque, and my you know, this is what I've always been taught. Although I know it's entirely, that was just in my head. Although that's not who I am, but what I'm trying to say is that indoctrination we have in primary socialization is really difficult. So by bringing people together in neutral spaces, that's how we start, as you were saying. So probably for RSCI, it's about, you know, looking at really and truly more outreach programs and how you bring communities together. And then as you build relationships, people say, come to see where I worship, come and see where I live, come to see my child playing football or whatever. And that's one way of doing it, I think.
And actually, one example in our CSI is that we got together with the Sports and Social Club, and we celebrated Pride together, and that was the first year that we did that, and we did like it was, you know, it was just a brilliant celebration, and it was open to everybody. It wasn't just for the LGBTI plus community, because we're all the one community. So that, you know, things like that all.
And I think just one more point to add is that when we look at, you know, how do we change people, as you say, for those of us who work in large organizations, the the top executive board, they've bought into it, okay? We don't really need to convince them. They have seen EDI and diversity, equity, you know, they've seen that as a main staple of our organizations. And then there's the middle managers, and there's you and I down here. It's the middle management group. They're the ones that change the policy as the emails come around. They're the one that creates their own little ad hoc rule if there's going to be an internal promotion, how people apply for it. And they're the ones, that layer is the layer that breaks the rules. They're the layer that perpetuates a lot of the inequity and inequalities. So some of the things we need to do is look at how we begin to get middle managers to attend programs that can open and widen their horizons around, you know, equity, and that's from my experience. And I run a white allyship program back in London, and I also do, you talked about bystander, I run another training program moving from bystander to upstander, how you become that. And we really need to target that group, because they're the ones that are preventing those of us at the exec level from achieving the organization aims and goals, in my opinion, from the groups I've worked with.
Thank you very much, Professor Morley. Would anybody in the room like to comment or raise a question, those of you attending? Yes, please.
I would like to say something, and I think this is a good forum to raise it. And RCSI, as an organization that have a good standing in the public and within the government as well, is my question / comment is, what is RCSI doing, or the Irish government doing, in the sense of for the qualified nurses from outside Ireland? That's and where I'm going with this is racism. These are students, these are qualified nurses that were taught, or their official language is English, and they were taught in English. They have their degree in English, and then for them to move over to Ireland or to Europe or to America, they have to do English tests. And the logic behind that, I don't know, somebody needs to really help me here, but I am challenging RCSI and Ireland to take, not waiting for UK or for other countries to remove that, and they'll say, I'm being conscious of the UN, of migration, of taking qualified nurses or doctors from other countries for the from the north to the south, or from the south to the north. I'm being conscious of that, but what is RCSI doing in that area? Because it's racism, it's a stigma as well.
So probably why RSCI thinks of their response. I'll just share some stuff, Patrick. Thank you. I think one of the important things is that, so this comes back to when I talk about decolonization. So we have a very colonized view. You must speak and write English this way, and that's how it should be done. And although we know people are taught in English and graduate in English, etc., their programs are in the, I say the UK, because we're in Dublin. The NMC has just made a move towards reviewing, so that's the Nursing and Midwifery Council in England, or the United Kingdom. We've just made a move to looking at how we reduce that and how we review English as a requirement. And so there are moves happening. I don't know what's happening in Ireland, but certainly there. And I know I'm part of the team that's reviewing the Irish Nursing Board's whole programs. So that review starts this month. So I am part of that team that's working here in Ireland with that. So it's something that probably is being taken into consideration, or will be taken into consideration. But certainly in the 4 nations, it's being looked at.
That's good to hear, and also that the nursing board's reviews is undertaken. I think that's an important fact as well. Anybody else in the room like to raise a question? I'll just go back to other comments and queries that have come in. One has come in as well in just a comment. Stigma in other areas. How do we support neurodivergent persons, including colleagues? Dr. Boyd earlier asked how we start with children. People often have lots of self-stigma from childhood, where they've had to work extra hard getting through everyday life. The good cognitive ability can hide a lot. Another comment, excellent presentation, Calvin and Liz. It is a privilege to be a nurse. And one from Abby Kelly, to answer Liz's question to Dr. Boyd, supporting socioeconomically disadvantaged groups in RCSI, we reserve at least 6% of school leaver undergraduate places for Irish students from these groups, and have now overreached this percentage. Through the generous support of alumni, we also offer a range of scholarships to students from socio-disadvantaged groups. Through Maria Kelly, we also offer a range of pastoral support for these students who come in. Another comment, Liz, thank you for this informative talk. How can we change the mindset of individuals who view anything from the norm? I think I've read that already, my apologies for duplicating. And thank you to you both for your inspiring suggestions on educating individuals' mindsets. Yes?
Thanks very much both. It's brilliant to have this event. One thing I was thinking about was, and I'd like your thoughts on it, was the role of discomfort and conflict in dealing with these issues. I think to make something uncomfortable, discomfortable, you know, the women on WAS are all white women. The women on WAS, all but one, are medical doctors, and as a nurse, you know, we face our own professional discrimination within healthcare. And I suppose sometimes it's about being open to challenge, and that's what I've learned. I've learned from Calvin and others, that actually being open to being called, not being called racist and you're a racist, but being challenged and having to self-reflect. But having moved back from the UK to Ireland more recently, I think Irish people are very uncomfortable with opening up to any kind of critique, and I'm just wondering how you feel, how important that is, rather than the softly, nicely diversity work, the challenging, oppressive work.
Well, I can try or attempt to answer that. I think, you know, looking at our Athena Swan submission for the School of Nursing and Midwifery, like one of the challenges that we have, that it is predominantly a female profession, and one of our actions is actually how to encourage more men to become involved in the profession. So it's role models like you and role models like Calvin. But it's just, so what are the barriers? Why are men not becoming involved in the profession? So some of the actions in that action plan is like I suppose a very targeted recruitment strategy in relation to encouraging more men to become involved in the profession. I think, like, you know, looking at the whole area of bystander intervention, and that's something that, you know, we in RCSI are looking at, but that is all about uncomfortable conversations. But I think there's an awful lot to be said for showing people these uncomfortable situations, because we had a number of staff who participated in the pilot program, and I suppose it made people think, it made people reflect, but it also made people really, really uncomfortable. And that has to be part of the conversation. So, like, even if you're looking at bystander intervention, which is traditionally around sexual violence and harassment, I think, you know, we need to look at it in relation to racism, in relation to disability, in relation to all the equality grounds. But, you know, if we're comfortable, we're not doing it right. And so I think we have to be uncomfortable. And thank you very much to Abby, who succinctly answered that question about socioeconomic stuff. So that was all very
Sorry, can I just make a point? So I trained in the UK in the 80s. So if you take an Irish 18-year-old go to London and an Irish 18-year-old who stayed in Dublin, their exposure and their experience to diversity and race is off the spectrum. Like the hospital I went to work in, people from Bengal, Punjab, Pakistan, Hyderabad, Bangladesh and India. That was our main groups. So we were exposed to Sikhs, Hindus, Muslims. Someone working in Beaumont in Dublin would not have had that experience. Nobody's a better nurse, but I think we do have to remember where we work, where we go to work, where we go to train, shapes our perception and our perspectives as well, and also our exposure. Because if I was to ask an Irish nurse in the 80s, have you any friends from Pakistan, Trinidad, Jamaica, St. Lucia or Africa? They would say no, because there was nobody there. But if you said that to us in London, of course we did, because we were all part of one group. So I think that's something that's very, in nursing from my experience, is that what we are exposed to sometimes shapes how we are as nurses.
Yes.
It doesn't make us a better nurse, but I think we have to remember that in nursing as well, that for me, coming back from overseas, Ireland is really not a diverse place compared to other jurisdictions. It really is.
Yes. Thank you for that, Erica. Can I invite Professor Thomas Kearns to comment? I believe you're online.
I am indeed, Murray, and good afternoon, or good evening, everybody, and good evening, Colin and Liz, and thank you very much. My apologies for not being there. I'm actually in Germany addressing a conference myself. I just want to raise a response because we were asked as RCSI to respond to the colleague who talked about the English language. And I'm speaking not so much as RCSI, but as a former regulator in this regard. RCSI, like every other university and every other higher education institution, it's regulated by a professional body like the Nursing and Midwifery Board of Ireland, has to implement the standards of the board as the regulator, as the statutory regulator. So the requirement in terms of language competence is a regulatory requirement, which is statutory. It's a statutory requirement rather than it being an educational requirement. That's the first issue. And I just want to say that from an educational perspective, the motivation behind this determination of the competence of the person to speak the language in which the care is provided is based on patient safety. And having worked for many years in regulation, you know, we would have had a lot of clinical managers, patients and others communicating with us as a regulator at the time that there were issues about the competence and indeed the willingness of some colleagues to answer the phone or whatever it was because of issues over their competence in terms of language. I don't think it's stigmatization to expect a competent English speaking or Spanish speaking or wherever you're working, if you're going to be working in a country. So if I want to work in Spain or in Italy or in France, I would have to be competent in the languages of those countries. Otherwise, there would be concerns over my capability to deliver care. And finally, an anecdote. My son, who is now a Canadian citizen after spending 8 years working and living in Canada, having been educated in this country, in Ireland, he had to do an English language competency test over there as well. So just to say, it's not an RCSI requirement, it is a regulatory requirement. And the driver for that is the provision of safe, competent patient care. Thanks, Mary. Thanks, colleagues. Wonderful presentation.
Thomas. Thank you. Anybody else in the room like to raise anything or comment?
Sorry, can I just ask this generally? It's about the curriculum, as Professor Calvin said. Like, if you want to check for patients' skin tone, if there's pressures or anything, at the moment, there is nothing there. It's all white, 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 white. And the only one that is available is just developed by either PhD student or something in Canada or somewhere. And I think maybe this is a forum. And when I say RCSI, I don't mean like RCSI made rule or this thing. It's just like generally because I know that RCSI have the power to be or to make the change. And on the final note, I would just say, if anybody is not following Professor Morley on Twitter, just follow him. Saturday and Sunday, your weekend, you have a free serotonin because there's some really jokes that
we've just heard about that when we were walking up. So going on to that.
I suppose just on your point, like that Represent project that we were talking about, like that's, I suppose that's a step in the right direction, and it is about, you know, making sure that we have different skin tones and we represent everybody. So that's, I suppose that's in its infancy. It's only 2 years old, but that started in our CSI, but that was very much as part of the medical program. But I understand that we need to get it further spread throughout the medical profession. But we are very aware of that.
And I think it's as we talk about colonization, a lot of the tools we use, and if we're particularly speaking, when we have friends and fellows here, if we're talking particularly about nursing and medicine, a lot of the tools we use were designed by white people, without people of skin color, of any color, in mind. And we still see today, I still hear people talk about patients in pain, that, you know, black women in labor pain, you know, shouldn't, you know, they don't need an epidural or and blah, blah, blah. They should be able to just give birth naturally as such without any assistance of pain relief. And I see it as well. I gave a talk a couple of weeks ago about the Council of Deans for Health in England. They have their 150 Leaders program. And someone, a student, posed a really important question. She said, why is it all the body mass index calculators are based on white people's body shapes and how it's done? So we have to look at now, your generation and those of us who can foster that, how we develop new programs of work that takes on this diversity and say, actually, this is how pain is managed in people of color or all people. This is how we manage. This is a specific tool if you have a patient of this background. This is a specific tool for that. So I think that's where we need to go now. And that's part of decolonizing that's coming. So, you know, where most people are very much at in academia, we're very much at that low level stage of decolonization, where we're changing how we look at things and you know, how we teach students. We need to move to the next level of where we do the research that will inform what we teach, to equip people to care for people in diverse communities. So hopefully decolonization will thread through to the other levels.
We saw that during the COVID pandemic when I went to Qatar. So about 50% of our staff were from the Asian subcontinent, and 3M masks are not actually, when we did fit testing, are not, they're patient basis. But then companies opened up in Asia, and we were able to get masks specifically for them, for our staff. So that's part of, you know, generating things that is just not based on one race. But we saw that with a lot of the N95 masks.
And that's one example of where particularly healthcare and education needs to work with other industries.
Yeah.
So there needs to be a pipeline created where we work with SMEs and other companies that can actually help us find solutions, not just keep it centered to us only, but collaborate.
Thank you very much. I'm aware of time. I think we could be here discussing this for another half an hour, but I'm conscious we've refreshments outside, and for those who are here in the room, just a couple of other comments that have come in I'd like to acknowledge. A privilege to be here. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for organising such a great event. We are catching up in Ireland and in healthcare and education in relation to equality, diversity and inclusion. These debates are so welcome. Thanks for sharing so much, everyone, and to our great speakers and organisers. Thank you both for your inspiring suggestions on educating individuals' mindset. So that's what's come through the chat, and it is great to be able to share those with those of us in the room as well. It remains for me to bring the events to a conclusion, this event to an conclusion, and it's really been really exciting and wonderful to be here in person and to have so many of you online as well. I think the key messages for me has been the importance in our daily lives in society as citizens of the country, as human beings, to embrace and to ensure we're conscious of and very aware of racism, stigma that can arise, and as so many of the comments have come in, how it can even in our own country resonate in relation to accents, etc. It certainly created awareness, and one thing that struck me when I was through just at an odd time was I thought of when we're talking about education, you know, as practitioners we have to engage in updating infection control and hand washing and basic life support. I thought this is another area we could be addressing and raising awareness. You know, repeatedly at regular intervals for our students and for our staff. And as a second point, this takeaway for me as well is Professor Morley's question to us: how has your diversity been embraced and shunned, or could it have been? And I thought that's something I'm going to have to take away and think of when I'm out walking as well. And I thought maybe we can all think of, reflect on as well. And so I say this has been a wonderful opportunity for such discourse and that. So it remains for me now to thank our speakers, Professor Morley, and I would like to welcome you to accept a little small token of our appreciation for. And also for you too, Liz, thank you for sharing some of your To those who have attended in person, it is wonderful that you are here and with us, and a particular thanks to those of you who have joined us virtually, and particularly engagement in the chat. Without the engagement of chat and enabling the discourse, we wouldn't have had such a rich learning event, and for that we're really appreciative of you joining with us and, as I say, engaging in the discourse of the evening. Thank you to members also of the executive, Catherine and Anya and Valerie and IT, and all of the RCSI who have made this hybrid event possible, and it wouldn't have happened without their sterling endeavours and their professionalism, and I have to say thank you very much on behalf of myself and the Dean and the board. Fellows and members and friends, your engagement with the faculty and at events of this nature is critical. It's paramount to the success of the faculty, and please continue to engage with us and enable us to continue and to be successful and contribute to nursing and midwifery professions, to healthcare and society at large. And just as a reminder, for those of you here, please view the Mary Frances Crowley Woman in Walls. It's wonderful. It never ceases to amaze me, even looking at it every so often. And we haven't been here in COVID, so it's even more exciting to go back and watch it again. So thank you all for being here and online with us. We really appreciate it, and have a pleasant evening. Thank you very much indeed.